6:31, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is a work session mainly focused on finishing up the warrant and a couple other minor items. First order of business we need to take care of. Gene hasn't been feeling well, so he's joining us remotely. So we need to take a quick vote to allow Gene to participate remotely. All in favor of allowing Gene to participate via phone, say aye.
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 Thanks. Any opposed or abstentions? Gene, you're in the club. So I can't see you, so if you want to interject, just raise your voice and I'll pick you up towards the mic. Couple of announcements before we get started. I got an email from Karen Yetten, who is on the Pembroke Energy Committee, and they asked for some time. So they're on our agenda for our next meeting. So they've got an initiative to talk about energy changes that may be possible to give Pembroke some additional choices, and wanted to partner with as many community partners as possible. So we'll be able to hear from them on first, I think it is. And then also I just wanted to point out, I just sent an email. I should have sent it yesterday when I got it, but there was some feedback from the budget committee, and we'll go over that in a little more in depth later. But there's basically one of the members of the budget committee had some questions / suggestions on how to lower our number a little bit. So I just forwarded that to all of you guys, but I'll read it out loud. We can go through it step by step when we get to that part. So before we go any further, we do have a public comment section. So typical rules, we'll keep it to 15 minutes, 3 minutes apiece. And if anybody's got anything to contribute, you can go ahead and come up to the mic and just give me name and town, please. Oh, that's really close. Just slide it up.
Hear me?
Yep, perfect.
So my name is Catherine Smith, and I'm a mother acting on behalf of her son. My son Nathan is a natural man living in the state of New Hampshire. By his birthright, he is afforded unalienable rights, which are protected in the Bill of Rights and by the Constitution of New Hampshire. The state constitution is in fact to be considered a trust indenture. Hence, by your oath of office, you are acting as trustee on behalf of my son, and you have sworn to uphold and defend his private rights. Article 7 of the Bill of Rights clearly states, every member of the community has a right to be protected by it in the enjoyment of his life, liberty, and property. He is therefore bound to contribute his share in the expense of such protection and to yield his personal service when necessary. But no part of a man's property shall be taken from or applied to public uses without his consent and that of the representative body of the people. Nor are the inhabitants of the state controllable by any other laws than those to which they or the representative body have given their consent. So I'm giving Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill of Rights, Article 8 and 29. So Bill of Rights, Article 8 is the accountability of magistrates and officers. All power residing originally in and being derived from the people, all the magistrates and officers of government are their substitutes and agents and at all times accountable to them. And then Article 29 is suspension of law is by legislation only. The legislative body of the people has not assembled to repeal public health laws NHRSA 14-C, nor has it enacted any statutes or laws regarding masks. Therefore, on my son's behalf, I declare that he has no obligation to comply with any unlawful acts of pretend legislation by a school board, as any such action by a school board or its members is repugnant and contrary to the Constitution of the state and is void of fraud or of no effect. A mask rule, immunization mandate, ordinance, order, direction, or instructions without any constitutional authority by any local town, city, county, state, or agency thereof can also be viewed as repugnant and contrary to the following constitutional rights, and I list 1 through 8. for your review. Additionally, I add US 42 US Code 1983 civil action for deprivation of rights. Every person who, under color of any statute or ordinance, regulation, custom, or usage of any state or territory or the District of Columbia, subjects or causes to be subjected any citizen of the United States or other persons within the jurisdiction thereof to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured by the Constitution and the laws shall be liable to the party injured in an action at law, suit, inequity, or other property or other proper proceedings for redress. And I've included the Department of Education letter just from the initial onset against the lawyer as your guideline. So in closing, I remind you that the legislative body has jurisdiction and has established public health policy for communicable diseases under Title 10, 14C. And they have reserved emergency powers to the governor for an epidemic of infectious disease under NHRSA 21P 53. The power of suspending these laws is reserved to the legislation. On behalf of my son and the entire student body, I encourage you to refamiliarize yourselves with the state constitution, the Bill of Rights, the United States Constitution, and the U.S. Code of Law. And respectfully, I remind you that all public officials shall take notice of these laws and make judgments and conduct themselves accordingly. I'm asking you to drop the mask mandate, make it parent choice. My son is not going to be wearing a mask in school anymore. If he is accosted by anybody, I will be holding people accountable in their public and their private capacity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any others?
Hi, how's everybody? Mark Dumont, Donna Drive. Just here with a weekly update on the numbers. I wanted to compare Allenstown and Pembroke again because we know Allenstown does not have a mask mandate, and we know Pembroke does. So, in saying that, Allenstown Elementary School, number of cases 4. Armin R. DuPont School, the middle school in Allenstown, number of cases 2. Now let's go to Pembroke. Pembroke Hill School, 18. Three Rivers School, 12. Now, they don't have a mask mandate. They don't seem to be having any problems with cases or COVID infections. They're not showing to be a significant contributor to COVID cases in their community. These communities are right next to each other. We're sitting in each other's laps. We share high school. You know, like quite literally, our kids in high school are sometimes probably sitting in each other's laps. I mean, boyfriend, girlfriend, all that stuff. Close contact. The communities share a lot more together with sports and everything else. You guys need to seriously consider this because you're taking the parents' choice away for their personal medical decisions, how to manage their children's health, and that's a big deal. And your mandate's not working. And I want to ask if anyone's like talk to the Allenstown School Board. Maybe you guys could get a tour of the school during school, see how many kids are actually wearing masks since they don't have a mask mandate. Maybe look at their ventilation system because they're doing a lot better than us. If you guys are about safety, then you need to be down at the school and see why they're doing better than us. And they're comparable. The communities overlap one another. They're both two small school systems. I hope you guys consider this. And I appreciate you guys letting us talk because I know it's a work meeting. I know you guys got a lot of budgets coming up, so thank you.
Thank you. And there's nobody else in attendance, so I guess we will move forward. Okay. So I think first we've got a couple of business items that we need to take care of. They just happen out of cycle. So there's a teacher nomination that's been in the drive. You guys have gotten a chance to look at it. But we're hoping to take some action on that if we can. And we can, if people are prepared, we can go ahead and take a vote on it right now. If there's discussion, we can wait till non-public. Gene, are you prepared with the nomination?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Okay. It's because it's so funny, probably. Because we're in January now, they go to the top. Okay.
The resume and cover letter is in your packet.
Yep. Go ahead, Ann.
What position is it for? Thank you. Thank you.
Why not batteries? Oh, there we go. Okay. So do you want a minute, Melanie, to just review it? Sure. Yeah. No worries.
I'll just repeat that since my mic was not working for batteries. So the position is for a math teacher at Pembroke Academy.
So I'll accept a motion, or if I don't hear one, we'll wait and do non-public later. Yep. Say that again, please.
Motion to approve.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. This isn't one we can have discussion on right now unless it's very general discussion. So are there any general questions before you take a vote? Okay. Then all in favor of approving the appointment of the math teacher, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sandy, Jean's and I. Any opposed or abstentions? Great. Thank you. That's one. The other piece of business that Patty brought to us is one that's kind of a tough discussion. So as we know, the eighth graders typically go on a field trip to Washington, D.C. We're coming up quickly on a deadline for a non-refundable deposit for that trip. And so we need to, I guess, make a decision if we want to approve that going forward with, COVID, what it is, and the possibility of the trip being canceled and all of that. So Patty, do you want to add any?
So the trip is every year the eighth grade goes to Washington, D.C. The trip is the week before April vacation. Next week, we have a $50 per student non-refundable deposit due. So we have a couple of options. Right now, the concern, we don't know obviously what things are going to look like in April. Right now, there's a vaccine mandate Mr. Marston shared with me. So there would be an issue with dining that may or may not be lifted in April. And then we could also discuss whether we would be willing to refund, if the company doesn't refund the $50 per student, if we go ahead, that would be something the board could discuss about if the trip needed to be canceled, whether or not you would be interested in refunding that if that happened. Mr. Marston did share that if the trip is not approved, there is the option of during that time frame or maybe over a few weeks doing 4 day trips to local places so that the students could still go and do things for their 8th grade year. There is some concern about what happens if a student gets sick. They would be isolated in a room, and it wouldn't be a 2-hour drive for a parent to come and get their child. They would be much further away. And then, how would we have that student supervised? So obviously some concerns. April, again, hopefully will be much better. But right now we have to worry about the deposit that's due on January 31st.
Any thoughts?
Can we delay the time of when they need to put their deposits in?
No, it's due. The company requires it.
So it has to be next week.
I have a couple thoughts. As far as like a student getting sick, are we planning on bringing maybe an extra nurse to handle that situation?
Mr. Marston did share that he would not feel comfortable going without a nurse. So
Yeah.
we would either have to contract a nurse to go on the trip, or if our nurse wanted to go, we could contract someone to cover here in her absence.
That could handle
One or the
isolating
other.
with
Yeah.
taking care of a
Mhm.
student.
Gene, do you have anything?
The deadline's coming up, so I think it's important that, we don't know what April's gonna look like, and I think it's important that we do everything we can to ensure that the trip moves forward, something moves forward at this point in time as best we can.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
kind of agree with Jean, and definitely not an expert, not a doctor. But our hospital is thinking it will peak the first week of March and things will look very different in March. And I'd like to believe the physicians that I speak to on a daily basis. So I'd like to remain optimistic and not cancel it right now. But I also don't want to put families into a burden that they can't get their money back.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I agree. And I guess the reason that I agree with it going forward is at the end of the day, that does, a family can always opt out if they're uncomfortable at that point, if they have a concern about their kid getting sick down there, or if they don't agree to whatever mandates might be in place in the city of Washington, D.C., they would be able to hold their student back. And I don't know, so many people have missed so much already. I'd love to give them this opportunity if we can. It sounds like Mr. Marston's put a lot of thought into, bringing a nurse and other contingencies. So I guess if we intend for this to approve this, then we need to have at least a little bit of a conversation of if it does get canceled, are we willing to reimburse those families as best we can from whatever's left over in our budget?
I would like to go forward with this also, but my concern is the mask. Because now if they refuse to wear a mask in school, they're sent home. What if we get to Washington and they refuse to wear their mask? Can we lax on the mask at that point?
I think that will probably be up to a lot of people besides us, right? They're not
Yeah.
technically in the school building, but I assume bus lines will have rules, and the
The
city of,
hotels may have their own
Oh,
rules.
yeah.
The
So-
restaurants may have their own rules.
I think it'll be important for communication to go out that families understand that if they go on this trip, they're agreeing to abide by whoever's
Sure,
rules there are.
Sure, yeah.
Because it really won't be school rules at that point, but it'll be bus rules and restaurant rules and that type of thing.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's possible, but I would like to just say it now. It would be almost wonderful. And I know maybe it can't happen that 2 nurses go on the trip so that if there's a medical issue, there's one nurse that's not dealing with COVID. And then you have a separate nurse that is handling anything COVID related. Because realistically, Washington, D.C. is not around the corner. They're going to have to isolate with those students and keep them separate from the rest. Do you know what I'm saying? And then if you have a medical emergency with a non-COVID, just saying, in a perfect world.
It would be perfect if we had 3 nurses.
Well, could we contract out even an LNA or
We have an agency that we're using currently, trying to contract out when we're shorthanded, and we would certainly contact them well in advance to see if they could hold the days for us.
okay, thank you.
Gina, is there anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, I do. I believe over this past, either over the weekend or yesterday or something, I think Washington just went into vaccine mandate to enter restaurants, public places. So you have to show a card, picture ID, all that stuff. So everything's out of our control once we said they could go. So, I'd like it to move forward. And I think everybody that would be going on the trip is going to have to, figure out how they're going to make it happen, ensure that their students going to have the best experience possible on the trip.
Dean, do you have thoughts about reimbursement if the trip were to get canceled?
Yeah, I mean, if that's a tough one. And I think I'd like to know more. It's canceling the trip. First of all, if we're canceling the trip, that's one thing. But if the tour company's canceling the trip, and I again, you may have talked about this. I can't hear everything clearly, so there's 2 different aspects of this. With the trip, if the trip might get canceled. It's one thing for us to do it, but it's another thing for the tour company to do it. So, if we get that reimbursement, that would be great. But I think I'd have to know the situation better, and obviously we can't do that at this point in time.
Right. I think we probably don't need a concrete decision on reimbursement tonight, but we do need to take some action on letting this go forward or not, I think.
We do. I would assume that Mr. Marston would want to inform parents, though, if the trip is canceled, there's a potential you may not get your money back. Maybe
How
just
much
leave
is
it
the
at that.
deposit again?
It's $50 per student. I think the whole trip is $750. But I don't think they have to pay for the rest until they go. So I think it's
Okay.
just a $50 deposit.
And roughly how
It's
many
non-refundable. I believe at this point there were 72.
So can we maybe talk about if it's canceled, parents know we'll reimburse half of it at least or something like that?
We're talking like $3,600, then, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
If the tour company cancels it, then I think, well, I would think logically that they would be at at risk for that. But 3,600 isn't not a little bit of money, but it's not backbreaking anyway, so I'd be fine with that.
I kind of agree with that too.
Okay. Any other thoughts, general? Okay. So, I mean, I guess I think we can say general feeling of the board is that we would assist as best we can with reimbursement and, with a final decision coming when we need to. But for now, I think we need to take an actual vote. So is there a motion to approve the trip?
I'll make a motion to approve the Washington DC 8th grade trip.
Okay.
I'll
Second.
second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of approval of the 8th grade Washington DC trip, say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Thanks for letting us get that out of the way. Actual agenda items, we've got board goals on there. I don't think there's a lot to update, so we'll save that one for a little later. So the first thing is the warrant. We've got copies here. I know Gene's familiar because he's been at NBC. So the couple of changes that have been made, there was some concern that number 3 and number 5 were drawing from the same fund. So we need to talk a little bit about why that was and how we want to move forward with that. There was also some concern from Jerry Fleury, who has dealt with most of the trust funds in town since time started, about how these were worded as far as having the particulars of what we plan to spend it on in there. We have been asked in the past to be as transparent as possible. I think that's why that was in there. But last year we did sort of a addendum, a supplemental document at the meeting that explained some of this stuff. And Jerry was just concerned that if we have these specific things in here, it limits what we can do with that money. And the definition of the capital reserve fund spells out exactly what we can use this money for anyway. So it's not particularly necessary in the warrant article language. But if we want to tell people what we're planning on using it for, it would be better done in a supplement. So I guess we can stick with these ones for right now. So there's that discussion. And then the reason I think that this is broken out into 2 separate articles is Josh was trying to get across that the 30,000 that's in number 3 is something like he really needs as far as the annual cost of floor replacements and exterior painting. That's something that he does every year. And he wanted to make sure that 30,000 was sort of prioritized. And then the 125, I don't want to say it's optional, but it is, the 30,000 is like as close to mandatory as it gets. And the 125 is planning for the future. it's going directly to fund CIP articles, but it's not quite as important as that 30,000, I guess is the best way to put it. So some discussions have been, do we want to keep the language of number 3 as raise and appropriate, which means if it passes, it's getting funded, it's coming from taxes. And then do we want to switch number 5 to say that it would come from surplus if there's surplus at the end of the year? I think that those two conversations are kind of intertwined, because if we don't decide to change number 5 to surplus, then it makes sense to combine these two articles into one, since they're drawing from the same fund in the same way. Or I'm sorry, going into the same fund in the same way. If we want to make one of them raise and appropriate and the other one to come from surplus, then I think it makes sense to keep them separated. Did that make sense? So I guess open to suggestions on how we want to handle that line. And Patty, did I miss anything?
I think Josh's concern has, like you said, he really wants to keep the cycle of the flooring and painting replacements and updates, which is the $30,000. He's equally concerned about the capital reserve fund being funded, because as things get moved down the line, it throws the entire CIP off. So, that it's at the board's discretion. Obviously, things tend to have a better chance of passing when they're from surplus. You do have money in that fund, but you're right about the 30,000 being more in a more immediate need.
Okay. So opinions from the board.
My concern is in the selectmen's warrant articles, they tell you what they're going to use it for. So I do not feel comfortable taking out the purpose of these, because the residents want to know what we're putting on number 3. We vote to raise $30,000 and then to be added to the school building capital reserve. It doesn't tell the residents what we're going to do with that 30,000. So if the selectmen do it in the warrant articles, why can't the school?
I mean, I think we certainly can. Again, it was a suggestion from Gary.
Residents want to know what we're doing with the money. So
I agree with Ann. I think you have a better chance of, especially that 30,000 in the floor project going through, if we clearly identify what it's being used for.
Conversation, Ann, and I don't know all of your warrant articles, obviously, but I think typically there's a warrant article for like a police cruiser, right? They're very specific warrant articles, and these are more broad. Jerry's concern is if we start breaking out, for instance, if we say that we're going to do 125,000 and we specifically talk about the heating units, the boilers, that it would be an accounting nightmare to try to say, okay, that year we approved this much for these purposes, and we would almost have to track dollar for dollar throughout those 5 or 6 things, instead of saying, here you go, voter, here, if you put money into this capital reserve fund, these are the things that we're saving up for, and this is what we're going to use the money on as a supplement, instead of actually in the warrant itself. That was his concern.
but I think that's just not being transparent with the residents. And if we're going to, it is a couple more minutes of accounting, which, I understand, but it's still, we're held accountable for where the money's going. So I think we should account as we're going along what we're using it for.
So is his recommendation there'd be a supplemental paper that explains each one of those?
I don't think he technically went that far. His recommendation was to not have that language in there.
Okay.
It was I mean, we did the supplement in the past. I actually think it was Ann's suggestion, and I think it was well received.
Okay.
And I certainly would want this information somewhere.
Exactly.
To Ann's point, I mean, we want people to know what our intended purposes are, and if we are asking for 125,000, and 2 years from now nothing on this list has been addressed, then that's a problem. So I don't think Jerry specifically said we should have it in a supplement. He said he doesn't think it's appropriate in there, and Patty and I kind of discussed it needs to be somewhere.
It needs to be, yeah, it needs to be somewhere. I agree.
But my also concern is that by the time we vote on this, the town report for the meetings has already been printed. So for historical purposes, this information may not, if we do a separate piece of paper, it may not even get attached. So historical purposes, if we're looking back through history at the town library, it won't even be in the book.
Yep,
So we're
that's a
not
good point.
transparent at all. What was that?
The capital improvement plan in there?
CIP?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the town report, yes.
So, and that would be where all of these items would be.
Right, but it wouldn't say, the warrant articles itself, we don't get it done in time, so the report is already out there. So if I go to the town library tomorrow and I pull out 1997, the school information might be in there or might not. So the history is getting lost.
Gene, do you have any input on it?
Should be spelled out somewhere. But it's again, Jerry. He's constantly, you know, use it for how are you going to use it, this, that, and the other thing, and then comes back around and says, well, you shouldn't have it in the warrant articles, which kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop. Look at his experience, and if we find ourselves in a situation where we appropriate the money for certain things, but we can't do these certain things for whatever the reason may be, then we're hamstrung. We can't use that money at all, even though it may be needed for something else. So, I'm kind of up in the air about it. I would tend to default to Jerry's expertise. It's because he knows a heck of a lot more about this than all of us combined. But again, it should be spelled out what the intentions are, somewhere that is easily referenced, today and 10 years from today. I don't know how we do that, but if this stuff goes into the binder, and that reference sheet should go into the binder with it.
Right. Okay. Is it okay? Can we set that aside for a minute and have a discussion about how we want to fund these two, and then we can come back and vote on these things. So thoughts on if we want to make one of them raise and appropriate and the other one from surplus, or combine them and make them both from a surplus, or combine them and make them both raise and appropriate? Anybody have strong feeling
I say surplus.
for both?
Yes.
Sorry, Ann said she would prefer to combine them and make them both from surplus.
For the 30,000,
The
I
number-
think it
oh,
should
sorry.
at least, yeah, for raise and appropriate, but
Yep.
I don't think we should combine them together. I don't think that's a good idea. So the 125, I would be leaning towards surplus.
Okay, so Jean, in case you couldn't hear, Melanie said she'd prefer to keep them separate, make the 30,000 raise and appropriate, and 125,000 in number 5 from surplus.
And that's kind of where Melanie is. Yeah, I feel the same way. 30,000 raise and appropriate, and 125 from surplus.
Okay. I think I'm there as well. I mean, honestly, I would like to put it all in there because I'm just paranoid that if we don't fund this stuff, we're going to end up with another village school on our hands. We're going to end up where we've gone too long without replacing these critical systems. And now it's at the point where we're out of code and our insurance company's threatening that we can't be in the building anymore. And we need to upgrade $2 million worth of stuff in the next 6 months, or we can't be in there anymore. But also 125,000 is a big price tag. It's a big hit on the tax rate. So I guess the way I reconcile that is what Melanie said. I would go, do the 30,000 from taxes and then fund the rest from surplus if it's there.
And I'm just thinking from like a taxpayer and the state of economy and what people are paying. I think this is the wrong year to combine those into the same one. Like, I think you may not have a warrant article go through if you combine those. That's just my opinion.
Okay, so we need to vote on a couple of these things. Any other comments on either conversation before we take a vote? Go ahead, Ann. Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Yep. Well, the reason why I said both from surplus is because if we look back, we have 2020, we gave back 677,000. 19, we gave back 1,000,000. 18, we gave back 1.3. So we have it in surplus every single year. So I don't think we should worry that we wouldn't have it from surplus. Give back 2021, I don't know where we're looking at now, but there's plenty of surplus. I'm not sure what meeting, but we just went through and spent, the library upgrade, the basketball court things, and we still had money to give back to the taxpayers. That's my reasoning for both of them separately. That's fine, but both out of surplus.
Understood. Anything else before we take a vote? Okay, so I guess first, we'll take these one by one just to make sure it's clear for Sandy. We have to do this in the affirmative. Is there a motion to accept the changes in the language to number 3 as written in this document? And to clarify, that means to remove the reasoning language.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it for vote.
Okay, any other conversation on that one before we vote? Okay, all in favor of removing the purpose language and accepting the changes as written in this document to article number 3, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Aye.
And abstentions? Great, so that one passes. So same question for article number 5. Is there a motion to accept the changes that are written in this document to remove the language that specifies the uses? Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, discussion on that one. We already pretty much covered it. So all in favor of accepting the language change as written to remove the language for intentions? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Aye.
And abstentions? Great, that one passes. And then, yeah, so we're just talking about the red line right now. Okay.
So Andy,
So-
can I just ask a
Yes,
question?
go ahead.
Using the intention vote no, are we attaching a separate page to tell them what these are used for?
Yeah, I
Or-
mean, that's my intention. I don't know. I don't think we need to vote on that, but we're going to we'll have a document, but also I'll speak to it at the meeting.
So why is it important to take it out of here if we're still telling the residents what we're using it for?
Only, again, I mean, I can only speak for my own vote, but only because Jerry thought that it might hamstring us on what we might be able to use it for. But again, we want to be transparent, so we want to let people know somehow he's just saying this isn't the appropriate place to do that.
Okay, because I'm just confused because I sit on both sides, why the selectmen can put it out in extreme detail and not have a problem with the warrant articles, but when we put in here what it is, there's a problem. And I can read you Article 12, what we're putting on the warrant article, and it tells you exactly about the clock and what we're doing and how we're doing it and where we're doing it. So the residents know, yeah, this clock is costing us $30,000 a year to operate.
Yep, I understand. But again, I mean, I will, whatever addendum we have, whatever supplement we have, I will, at the time that these are spoken about at the meeting, I will make sure that all of these things are clear on what the intended purposes are. And then, like, I think for historical purposes, like Patty said, everything that's in these is in our CIP plan, which should be included in the, the town report. Sorry, brain fart. So, so we have to talk about reserve. So first of all, is there a motion to change? Let me see. Is there a motion to change number 3? Well, is there a motion? Is there a motion to combine the 2 warrant articles, number 3 and number 5? First of all. Okay, then if not, is there a motion to change the language in number 3 to reflect that it should come from surplus funds at the end of the fiscal year?
I make the motion.
Right? Is there a second?
Second.
Right? So for discussion, again, this is to see if number 3 will be changed to come from surplus at the end of the year. Is there any other discussion on that before we vote?
Yeah, I have a question. Where exactly are the figures in this book of like the past couple of years, what we've had left in surplus that Ann was talking about?
I have it from the school budget 2022, 2021, page 53. It shows and the new one.
Yeah, and is that the trust fund balances or is that the surplus? And I think the trust fund balances are very close to that. It might be 75, 74. They're within a couple of pages of that document. It's disgusting that I just. We'll give everybody a minute to look at those. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, then all in favor of amending the language of article number 3 to indicate that the $30,000 should come from surplus funds at the end of the fiscal year, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Aye.
Aye.
And abstentions? Jean was opposed. Right, Jean?
Yes.
Okay,
And
so
I have
that
a
one
quick
fails.
I have a quick
Sorry.
question, Andy.
Yep, sure.
So a resident can stand up at the meeting and go ahead and rewrite the warrant article and have that voted on if they want it to come from surplus, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. Beat a dead horse. But last year, we put in our warrant articles what we were using the money for.
Okay.
So I'm just very concerned that we're not. I know the vote's already been taken, but I'm just very concerned. It was okay last year. Jerry was still on the budget committee.
And certainly, and just to see if he can clarify it all. If we've got a meeting Thursday, if you are available and want to join us, you can probably explain your position better than I can. And if you want to do that, you can certainly. I'm sure he'll give you a minute to voice your concerns.
Thank you.
Okay, so article number 5. Is there a motion to amend the language of article number 5 to indicate that the $125,000 should come from surplus at the end of the fiscal year?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
All right. Any discussion on this one? Okay. Then all in favor of amending the language of number 5 to indicate that the $125,000 should come from unexpended fund balance at the end of the fiscal year, say aye.
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 And opposed? Aye. And abstentions? Right, so that one passes. Good on those two, Patty? That was a lot. Okay, right now we've got 33% battery left. So when we hit a certain point, I might ask Jean to call one of you guys if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay, so. Oh, yes, I forgot. Sorry. So, yes, thank you, because I definitely would have skipped that. So, yeah, so we did clarify number 2. This is the lower dollar amount that's in the budget packet. So the document that we got last time for the warrant was incorrect. It had, I don't remember, 28 something or something. So we do need to finalize the vote on that one. And Amy did let us know that she wasn't gonna be here tonight, so she's not gonna be counted in that vote, but she understood, So I'll read this one in its entirety. To see if the Pembroke School District will vote to raise and appropriate the Budget Committee's recommended amount of $28,760,113 for the support of schools, for the payment of salaries for the school district officials and agents, and for the payment of the statutory obligations of the district. This article does not include appropriations voted in other warrant articles. So all those in favor of approving Article number 2, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Aye.
And abstentions?
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure thing.
So that is the confirmed amount. So are we gonna get like an updated last?
Yeah, it does. It didn't before. Well, that might be, you got a printed version, so that might not be the most up-to-date one. There's been a couple of changes since that was printed. I
Okay.
think.
Well, these are the ones from the last meeting. This book.
I always use the one on the drive.
That's okay. Now that you're telling me that the folders are out of date, I will go in.
Yeah, and that's honestly the only reason that I don't use the paper ones because they get updated so often.
Yeah.
But that should be the number going forward.
Okay.
So-
I'm good with that. Then I'll go back into the drive after. Thank you.
And just to reiterate the point, there is a budget committee meeting on Thursday. And it is kind of, it's not the last meeting of the session, but it's kind of the big meeting of the session. And I think the intention is to have a final discussion and vote on every warrant article, both town and school, unless there's anything outstanding that's not available. So anybody that's interested in warrant articles and budget numbers and things like that, Thursday is an important meeting. Those are recorded also. They're available on the town website. So definitely check that out if you're interested in this stuff. Okay, so
Just have a quick question.
yes,
So the budget from November 30th, 2021, that's obsolete. We're still sticking with what's in the binder? Awesome. Thank you.
okay, so I think we're on to number 7. I think the only change in there is the same discussion that we've had on the other ones of removing the purpose language. Correct? Okay. So, I don't know if we want to rehash this or not, but it's the same discussion that's been had for number 3 and number 5. I'm assuming, Ann, you got the same concerns on that one?
Yes, and like I said, for last year, we had no problem putting in our warrant articles exactly what we were using it for.
Yeah, I honestly think that one particularly was on there. It said paving, like, like exactly like that.
And at the meeting, someone stood up and they said, I believe it was PA that needed improving, but don't quote me on that, but no residents asked.
Okay, so, is there a motion to amend the language of number 7 as presented on this document to remove the purpose language? Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
I'm sorry, I forgot to pick up you got Jean made the motion. Okay. Okay, so discussion?
Yeah, quick discussion.
Sure.
So my only question with this one's a little bit different and it's coming from the trust fund. Does that change anything with the language, like regulations of the warrant articles? Because it is coming from a trust fund.
So the other ones are coming from trust fund too. And that's
Okay.
that's part of Jerry's point is that when these trust funds are established, they're established for fairly specific purposes.
Okay,
So that's part of the safeguard is we can't possibly take that money
okay.
and use it for something completely
That's
separate.
exactly what I was asking.
So
Okay.
this one, the improvement expendable trust fund is pretty limited if I remember correctly. And I mean, paving is the most, I guess, usual use for that money on here.
Okay.
And again, it like painting and flooring, it's a rolling thing that happens every year somewhere.
I think part of Jerry's point when he talked about us getting stuck is if you said you're putting 25,000 in here and you name paving and something happens on your site, like there's some catastrophe with a field
Like the
or
drain at Hill
and,
School.
and then
Yeah.
you could go back and say, oh no, you told us you were putting that money aside for paving, so now you can't fix your site that has had a failure of some sort.
So
So-
to that point, I think not only in that addendum, not only should we put in what our intended purpose for these dollars is, but I think the language of the trust fund should be in there too. And that kind of, hey, this is what we plan to do with it, but here's the scope of things we could do with it if there's emergencies.
I agree with that. Yeah, that would be helpful.
I think that kind of covers both ends of it.
And you have a question?
Sure.
Drew? So what currently is in the site improvement,
Oh, let me pull it up.
at page 76?
That sounds right. 75, 76 right in there.
So it looks like right now we have 65,567. So if there was an issue with something else besides paving, we got the money.
Right.
The site improvement expendable, it doesn't, in there, it's not just pavement, it's site improving. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm pulling up the, I didn't have the budget spreadsheet up. Okay, other questions about this one? Sorry. Almost dropped Gene. Okay, so there is a motion and a second. Last call for discussion. Okay, all in favor of amending the language of number 7 to remove the purpose language, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Aye.
And abstentions? Okay. That gets us past page 1. All right, so looks like we have the same conversation on number 8 also. So is there a motion to amend the language of number 8 to remove the purpose language? I'll make that motion. I never get to do. Is there a second?
Second.
Great, discussion on this one, same, second verse, same as the first?
Just a quick. May need to change the wording because that doesn't really make sense if you're going to cross out that whole sentence. Just reading it. Does
Yeah,
it?
these will all go for final review.
They'll go
from
for a
the,
review, right? Because that doesn't really, that's like a hang-on sentence
Yeah.
with nothing happening.
No, I think it will end with previously established.
Yeah,
And then we'll take all the red crossed off.
That's
yeah,
right.
there'd be a period
Okay,
there.
there'll
That's
be a
right.
period there.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
It will make a little more sense. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's all I had.
But we, just so you know, it'll get run by legal again too, to make
Okay.
sure that it meets all the RSAs and whatnot.
All right, that's it.
Okay, then all in favor of amending number 8, to remove the purpose language, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Okay. Number 9 is okay. Number 10, there was an astute observation by somebody on the MBC, I can't remember who it was, that at least the initial proposals that we've gotten for this project were not just for an addition, but also a renovation of the current building to bring it up to, modern standards or whatever. So in a funny twist, we want to add some language to this one, to rename or to name the trust fund that we're hoping to set up the Pembroke Hill School Addition and Renovation Capital Reserve Fund. And just a quick note on this one, the town actually has a fairly similar article this year. I think it's one of the ones that has to do with the clock, where they're, the intention of this warrant article is kind of feel out the town to see if they're on board with this project by, committing some money up front to get all the legwork done. And the town has one that's very similar, so it's neat to kind of see both sides work in the same direction on that one. The clock has been an issue for some time, and they're trying to gauge, how much the town really wants to keep pouring money into it, so they've got a similar article that basically says, hey, are we going to commit to this thing or are we not? So pretty cool. Anyway, sorry, went off track there. Is there a motion to modify the language of number 10 to include, or to change the title of the capital reserve fund to Pembroke Hill School addition and renovation capital reserve fund?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, is there a second?
A second.
Okay, is there discussion?
My discussion was, as I said at the last meeting, I don't feel comfortable voting for it because we may not renovate Hill. We may not, the school burns down. I know they said we can always go in later and change the name of it, but I don't feel comfortable voting yes for this.
Okay. Oh, and I'm sorry, I should have noted this before there was a motion. I did double check with Jerry to his knowledge as far as if this money is appropriated this year and then for years the actual project is voted down and we give up on it or whatever, we can certainly dissolve that trust and return that money to the taxpayers. So I was pretty sure that was the case, but I did confirm that at this past meeting.
So Andy, my second question is, in a few years, are we going to the town again to ask for a new school? Are we asking for a bond for a school or to adding on? There's 250,000. They're just asking to start, the surveys and the engineers and stuff.
Right. The 250,000 would be for the legwork, the engineer, the plans. And then it's also written in the language here that if all that stuff is done and the project moved forward, any balance that's left in there could be applied towards building costs as well. But yeah, I mean, who knows how things will go, but I think the intention right now is that next year, yeah, we're in 2022 now, so in March of 23, that we would be hopefully bringing a bond forward for an addition. And that the committee recommendation is out in the drive somewhere, but there was a designated number of classrooms. And I think the other thing was a gym with a stage, which is the key part. And then yes, renovations to the current part of the building also to bring it up to not code, but modernize, right word?
Thank you.
So yes, that's the long-term intention. Any other discussion on this one? We're just talking about modifying the language. Okay, then all in favor of modifying the language of number 10 to change the name of the capital reserve fund to Pembroke Hill School addition and renovation capital reserve fund, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Aye.
And abstentions. Great. So the last change, I believe. Oh no. Oh. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we gotta do 11 also. So 11, it was recommended that we remove 11. Jerry again had concerns, and so did other members of the budget committee, that I think mostly that it was kind of a budgeting nightmare. There's also some lack of understanding or lack of clarity around exactly what that dollar amount could be, some of the mechanics around the RSA, and in talking to Patty, this was brought to us because it's available to us. In the research that I've done, and I'm editorializing here, so I apologize, this is just my view on it. I think, and Jerry Fleury kind of lended some credence to this, I think if we were a district that did not have reserve funds set up already for these specific purposes, that this would be very useful. I think the purpose of this RSA, and even the earlier one that had the 2.5%, was so that you could reserve some money in case you had unanticipated costs. But we generally should be able, like Ann said before, we should generally be able to cover those unanticipated costs because we have a special ed reserve fund and we have a building reserve fund and we're set up well to handle unanticipated costs. So I spoke with Amber and Patty. They didn't have strong feelings about keeping this in here. So what we're doing tonight is to see if we're okay with just getting rid of number 11. So is there a motion to delete number 11?
Remove Article 11. School
Right, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion or questions on this one?
This one, I just, it was kind of nice to hear Jerry's take on it too. It was kind of rubbing me the wrong way, so it works out.
Yeah, I guess I could go either way on it. I understand the intention, but like I said before, we are set up well to cover it. I think the reason I don't like it is, as I've said to the town for years now, the school budgeting process, when it plays into the March meeting, because of how the town cycle and the school cycle are not the same, and because we're voting on such a future budget for the school, there are already multiple layers of complexity in getting people to understand, exactly what's happening. And this, I think, would just add one more layer that would be really, really difficult to explain, A, why we need it, and B, how it works. I mean, there's a lot of people in the MBC or on the MBC that have been on the MBC for a very long time. There are people on that committee that have been high level working on the state's overall budget. The person that was trustee of trust funds in this town for God knows how long, like people that know what they're doing. And it took a lot of conversations to get everybody in that room fairly comfortable with what this really meant. So if that's the case, I think that trying to explain a need for this and its use in any, consumable manner at the meeting is going to be next to impossible. Any other discussion? Okay, then all in favor of removing current article number 11 from school district warrant, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
And abstentions? Okay. And did we vote on new number 11? Okay. So this is something that we've mentioned a couple of times, but I think this is the first time we've seen an actual warrant article for it. As we all know, PACE closed last year. Their board has voted to close. That process is not official until our town meeting votes on it. It does have to pass with a 2/3 vote. And I mean, it is, for all intents and purposes, gone right now. They have a closing date of, I want to say it's sometime this week, actually, to sell the building. If it's not, it's next week. This would result, if there are any residual assets, if we vote to dissolve the organization, any remaining assets would come back to the school district, which would, obviously be applied to next year's budget. There's a very loose estimation of that money right now, between $100,000 and $150,000. Certainly don't quote me on that. But anyway, to actually finish off this process and dissolve PACE Academy requires us to have this on the warrant and have it passed by a 2/3 vote. So I'm looking for a motion to add number 11. I'm sorry. We need to vote on number 11 to see if the school board recommends this article. So I'll read it in its entirety. To see if the Pembroke School District will vote to accept the recommendation of the Board of Directors of the PACE Charter School to dissolve the organization effective June 30th, 2022, with the condition that, subject to acceptance by the school board, such assets as remain after the satisfaction of the obligations of PACE shall revert to the district in accord with state law, 2/3 vote required. All in favor of this article, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Or abstention? Fantastic. I think that's it. Did I miss anything, Patty? All right. Thank you all. That. Okay. So, budget. I apologize I didn't get this to you sooner. I wanted to go through. There was one member of the budget committee that expressed a few areas that he thought we might be able to make some reductions in our budget. So I just wanted to go through those and make you aware of what they are, and give Patty a chance to weigh in on those. So I did the email list to you, but I know you don't have computers with you, so I will summarize these the best I can. So this is from Mike Connors, and worth noting, he started off with a paragraph that was very nice, appreciative of the work that has been done, and he's pointed out a few sections where he's got some questions, and we might be able to reduce some. So the first paragraph, he talks about the 1,200 lines, which are the special programs. And he says, I know that historically the 1,200 account is off limits for budget reductions due to the legal requirements to provide the required services. On the spreadsheet, I highlighted specific accounts, and I can go through those lines, where the proposed budget for fiscal year 2022-2023 is significantly higher than the actual spent in 2021 that just ended. For example, line 402, special placements, the actual spend for 2021 was 135,261, and the fiscal year budget is 220,000. This is in line with the fiscal year 2021 voted appropriation, but an increase of 65,000 over the actual spent last time around. He says there's a tendency when putting budgets together to utilize the current appropriation as a base number and add any projected cost increases to that. In this case, we're approximately 45% into the budget year. So he's wondering what our actual spend to date is, if we can get that. Is it in line with the 2021-2022 budget? And if not, do we need all of the projected increase for 2022-2023?
Andy, can I ask again what you said at line 402?
Yep, that was his example 402.
Thank you.
So I think the answer there is that that's a formula that we use based on the students that we have.
That is correct. We actually went through all of the special education lines again, and there were some numbers on our cut sheet for that we did find a couple of things that had changed with student needs. But this is based on real-time actual students, and the numbers can vary wildly from year to year. Last year, there were special education parents that chose to keep their students home. So there were some services that did not get delivered by parent choice, and some that were done remotely. It was not a typical school year, but in a typical school year, those numbers can really vary. Like you said, we are so far in advance of trying to project services that students will need, but we do take a look at our students that we currently have. We factor in the students in preschool that we know are coming into kindergarten, as well as the seniors that we know are leaving. So those are real-time numbers when the budget's developed.
Okay. The other example that he gives is total special programs, which is 476. I'm assuming that's the same. Okay. In the same paragraph, he talks about 579, which is co-curricular stipends. I'm assuming last year's actual spend on that was down because we canceled some stuff.
Yes, there were clubs that did not run.
Okay. And then diagnostic services on 670 and 675.
Those are, again, based on student need. That's our school psychologists, occupational therapists that are hired and go out to the schools based on students that need those services. So those, again, are based on the students that we have right now that we know about.
Okay. So that was kind of one section of Mike's concerns. Are there questions on anyone want more clarification on any of those before we jump to the next one?
No.
And just so you know, there's like 4 of these sections, but that's the biggest one, the longest one. Okay, so the next group, he says 2213, improvement of instruction, and 2290, staff workshops. He says these budget lines are historically underspent. I understand that we're required by the CBA to reimburse teachers for courses that they take and workshops they attend. This does not mean that we're required to budget every line at 100%. I'm requesting that the school board take a look at these lines and adjust the proposed budget lines to better reflect the actual spend.
Andy, 2213?
Yes, 2213 and 2290.
2213 starts on line 765. And, he's right. You are obligated to fund up to a certain amount in the collective bargaining agreement. You could choose to cut funds out of here, and then, assuming that teachers request all of those funds, you have to fund it, whether the money is in the budget or not. And I can say last year was definitely one of those years that teachers, we were so shorthanded, and with COVID, a lot of workshops were canceled. Teachers didn't go to workshops and didn't take courses. for lots of different reasons, their own family issues here, not having subs. So definitely, it probably was underspent last year.
So I guess I should say I probably probably did this out of order, and I should have brought this up before because we already did vote on the budget number. But we could, if there are significant concerns around any of these, we could vote to reconsider that. So just throwing that out there, we can go back and fix that. That's my bad. I apologize. Any questions about that group, the improvement, basically the professional development stuff?
No.
Right. I almost forgot you were there. Okay, the next one is 2722 special ed transport. I'm assuming this is all going to be the same conversation, but just so that I can get those out there, the combined average actual spend for lines 1303 and 1305 for the last 2 fiscal years is 63,797, while the proposed budget is requesting 204,000, which is an increase of $140,000. How's the actual spend trending for the current fiscal year for these 2 budget lines, and do we need such a large increase for next year?
It's basically the same as the 1200 lines. We take a look at the students that we know we have and who needs transportation as we speak. I can't tell you who may or may not utilize it, but it's based on the students that we currently have.
So just as an example for my clarification, if we assume, or if we project looking at the population that we have 25 kids that are going to need this transportation, we're budgeting for 25 kids because it's a required service that we have to offer. But if parents transport 5 of those kids or whatever, then that's okay, and we've got extra money.
It depends on the transportation you're looking at. So we have a bus contract for a small bus to go between our schools for special education students that attend school here. So no matter how many kids are on that bus, we need to run that bus. But we do have students in out of district placements, and that could be a significant cost savings if we're budgeting $20,000 for a student to be transported to Concord, and that student leaves that placement, or the parent decides to transport, then that would be a savings. We would not incur that cost.
Gotcha. Anybody else have questions on special ed transport?
No, not at all. Like, just a comment, like the special ed department has it like to a T and knows exactly, as far as education or transportation or whatever it may be, or even testing, they know like when that testing's coming up, just living the world. They know when the testing's coming up. They have it down to a science. And I would like pretty much trust them on that's pretty close numbers, because they're basing it on how many kids they have in each one of those programs, starting in preschool, starting at age 3. They really know what to expect at each developmental level. So I think our numbers really are right on.
Okay.
Just my opinion.
Any other comments on that one before we move to the last section? Okay. Sorry, Gene, did you say something? Okay. So the last section mentioned is 2,900 other support services. He specifies a bunch of lines. I'll whip them off, but I think you can start at 1381. He says 1381, 1383, 1385, 1387, 1389, and 1391. So every other line from 1381 to 1391. It says they appear to be new line items where we've not spent anything in the last 2 fiscal years. Based on the historical spend, this represents an increase of $122,000. Given the significant increase in the budget this year, could we look at these lines to see if they can be reduced to mitigate the overall budget increase?
Those are the raises, and the reason that it looks like there's nothing spent is because we put them in a pool, and then when we issue contracts, the money gets moved up to the salary lines. So we do expend those funds. They just get moved into the salary lines.
I knew that. Sorry. Okay. So any questions on that? Do you guys understand? We've been down the road with the pool increases more than once in the past couple of years. Everybody gets how that works. Okay. So just so he's closing, with the budget surplus that we historically obtain, the ability to transfer within any line within the budget and the reserve accounts, I feel that we can reduce the proposed 2022-2023 budget by approximately $500,000, providing much needed relief to the taxpayers while still providing adequate funding to properly educate our children. Thank you for your consideration.
Andy, if I may, since I won't be there, would you just extend our thanks to Mike, because he clearly spends a lot of time looking at this and trying to find areas that we could realize efficiencies. And I do appreciate that time, even if they're not areas that we would be comfortable with. And you know, there is the option of saying, okay, we're going to reduce special education by 100,000, and then if we need it, we'll go to the trust. But it is a risk. We've had students move in that we didn't plan for. Luckily, we've been able to have excess in those areas. And I think when he says give relief to the taxpayers, we would never utilize the money if we didn't need it, and it would go back to the taxpayers. So it would, you know, help in the end. So I just appreciate the work that he puts into this.
Yeah, for sure. I will pass that on. Before we close out, does anybody have questions, comments on these particular items? Okay. And one more thing. So I just wanted to also bring it to your attention. I got an email from Jerry Fleury also. I figure that's worth sharing. So he says the entire 1200 series is coded as a fixed cost, presumably because it is special education. But a true fixed cost has a characteristic not seen in many special ed lines. A signed contract for delivery of a commodity at a contracted price is a clear example of a fixed cost. In the budget at hand, the example of something classified as fixed, which bears no similarity to a fixed cost, is line 431 on page 14, special ed supplies. The actuals for the last 2 years were lower than the voted amount, but the request for the coming years is exactly doubled. This creates the appearance of being an arbitrary number and casts doubt on any managed non-fixed expenditures in the 1200 class. My question is how the discretionary requests on the 1200 lines are determined. Since the 1200 lines are 36.5% of the regular and special education totals and a significant expense, are there more fixed costs which might be inflated? So I think I've had this exact conversation with Jerry last year and possibly the year before, but I think it's a difference in terms. Amber uses the term fixed costs, and I think in the strict accounting world, that's possibly not the best term, because they're, like Jerry said, this is not, we've agreed to pay Eversource this amount every month for the next 3 years. But it is fixed in that it's not non-discretionary. We have federal government obligations to cover these costs. There are widely accepted formulas on how we get to these numbers. And so, I think it's just a question of terminology, really. But if anybody's got input, happy to hear it and take it back. But I just wanted to share this email with you. And I'll forward this to all of you as well, so you've got a copy of it. Okay. So on that, I think we hit warrant articles, we hit the budget, we hit the field trip, we hit the appointment. We've got board goals on here tonight. I did not prepare bullet by bullet on that one. I can say that I did start looking at the language for the warrant. The policy for social media, and I've got some changes that I'll send out to all of you, and Melanie and Jean in particular on the policy committee. But I do want to have Josh Ruby look over them first and make sure they make sense. Go ahead.
Say, you did ask me to give Josh the current and sample policy, and I did that, and I told him what we were working on, so he's looking those over as well, so he'll be prepared for that.
Okay, so that's coming down the pipe. I did try another time to reach out to Jim Garvin regarding the schoolhouse, and I haven't heard back. So Jim, if you happen to hear this, hope everything's okay, and give me a call if you get a chance. But I'll keep trying on that one. Are there any other? So we also did talk last time a little bit about, a culture climate survey. That's something that we definitely want to follow up on. But I think after public hearing, when we're a little bit out of budget stuff, these work sessions can kind of shift back to being about board goals primarily. Andy, do you have a question?
I have a question on goals.
Sure.
Because we're coming up to the budget, are we still looking to include more information regarding salaries and benefits of the Pembroke, for the Pembroke Town report of all the school district employees?
Do you know when the town reports due?
Excuse me?
Do you know when what the date is for the town report information?
I don't. I can get it tomorrow.
I know it's coming right up. I guess we can talk about that. I wish Amy were here, but feelings on what we want to include and what we don't want to include. So historically, the roster that we get in our budget packet that goes in, right? Or yeah, sorry.
Nope. All you do is you put your grades. If a teacher is level 3, this is what the base, this is what the max. Nope. Nope.
So I guess it's an open conversation of what Anne has expressed before what she would like in there. And if you want to reiterate, feel free. And then we can kind of discuss what stuff people are comfortable with. I know that there's some concern on whole numbers as far as benefits and whatnot. There's HIPAA stuff with insurance, but
Well, what the town report puts in is I'm a selectman, I get paid. So my name is in there, the amount I get paid, the amount that goes to your taxes, your Medicare, your FICA, and the grand total. So residents knows how much is going, and if I was eligible for retirement. So when we have so much discussion about how we can't change what we have to contribute to the retirement system for the teachers, and that we're getting pushback from the state to put in more than what we first started with every single year. So if that's one of the lines in there, we're not talking health insurance, dental insurance, life insurance, all of that. It's just your name, your position, what you get paid that year, how much goes into the retirement. I'm not eligible, but every other information is in there.
go ahead, Patty.
I think the conversation that we had about this specifically was that we weren't going to have information ready in time for this year to create a new report, because we don't have a final a total compensation report. But what we do have, I think what Ann just mentioned, with the rosters, it does have everybody's name and their masters plus 30, and this is their salary. And then maybe at the end we could have a line that said, this is how much we paid in New Hampshire retirement in total, however, hundreds of thousands of dollars, so that, because we can easily get that. We don't have a report broken down by each person for total compensation, but those are still the numbers that people would be able to see. This is how much we have to pay to the retirement system.
Right, because the residents don't get this whole, they don't get, I don't know how many pages says to this year, 70 something pages. They don't get that at the town meeting. So if we could have something even to, for that information, because that's one thing we can't change.
That's the one thing I don't know what page number it starts on. You know where that roster is? I'm scanning on the master agreement. Oh, I went way too far. Oh, I must have a different copy because 58 is not.
Does anybody know what other towns do? Is this something that's normally done? No.
Because on page 142, it does have the appendix that says, what step 1 is, all the way to 15.
Yeah.
That's what we do put in the town report.
Yep.
Currently.
So, and would having that pay scale in there, and then also if we, and Patty, if this is not legal or whatever, just throw a shoe at me, but if we just included the roster that's in our budget binder, would that suffice?
What included here? What page is that again, Patty?
58. Yeah.
Here, there's an example.
I think that would be perfect, because that way it tells us, how many teachers are in class 15, and what we're doing for the retirement system, because I'm sure next year is going to be more that we have to contribute than this year.
And this is all public information that we've published elsewhere, so I can't see any legal problems with it.
Correct. Because they're public employees, right?
So is that easy enough to pull out and send over?
Mhm.
So I guess, is everybody, I don't know if we need a vote on that, but is everybody okay with including the certified roster that's in our budget binders, be sent to the town to go in the annual report?
I'm okay with that.
Dean said yes. I am as well. So I think that should be,
And then do you want us to add something at the end that says, for all of these staff members, this is how much we spend in retirement costs, insurance costs?
Yeah, and if we could put like the percent we have to, because next year I'm sure it's going to go up. We know it won't
Yeah.
stay the same.
right.
But I just emailed David, and also we have a meeting tomorrow to find out what the deadline is.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything for board goals tonight? Like I said, when budget wraps up, we'll shift focus back to those goals and we have them listed out. Okay. Patty, do you have anything else that we need to take action on tonight?
Not that I can think of.
Any board members have anything else that they want to bring up? If not, I will accept the motion to adjourn.
One thought a minute ago.
Sure.
The warrant articles.
Yep. Good call.
The one thing that does concern me is Article 10 being down so low. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So,
Yeah, I think that's probably the only one that concerns me. We generally, I think, put all of the surplus ones at the end, and their order matters, right? Because that's how they'll get funded if there is a surplus. So I guess the question then is, if we move number 10 up, there's a possibility that eats up, a huge chunk of our surplus, and other things might not get funded, which is certainly okay. I just wanted to point it out. Dean, do you have a suggestion of where you'd like to see number 10?
I was thinking probably right at number 6.
So after number 5, or
Yeah.
what current number 6 is?
Change to unassigned fund balance. Anyway,
Yep, we did.
yeah, so 6, I think 6, yeah.
Okay, does anybody have thoughts on that?
I would agree with that. I don't think we should leave it towards the end.
Ann?
I thought that was a good spot when he first suggested it also.
Patty, do you have any other concerns about the order? Side of the reading number 10? Okay. We need a vote on that? All right, we don't need a vote, Gene, so we're gonna go ahead and move number 10 to where number 6 currently is. Move everything else down. Anything else anybody's got for tonight? Thanks for that, Gene, that was a good catch.
Andy, can I just say that when we're asking when information is due for the town report printing, David had in one of our emails that we need to make a decision on what letter we're putting in for the printing, and we have to decide tomorrow. So I assume it's within this week.
Okay.
Is their deadline, but I'll definitely get in touch with him he'll be there by 8:30. I can email you both.
He has the deadline.
What was that?
Kathy has the deadline because
Oh,
all
she
our
does.
reports are due. So she knows what it
Okay.
is. So I think we're good
Oh, good.
unless it changed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope not.
All right, anything else?
Town report. Were you able to talk to Dave about changing our color?
I haven't sent the email yet, but I will. I will before Thursday. Yeah.
What does he need from David?
No, I had made a comment that I don't like how the big graph on the back of the town report is green, yellow, red. And as a person that spends too much time in Excel, red is always bad. Like
Mhm.
red's the things that aren't done yet, and the school
Oh.
district is always red.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask David if we could change it to maybe
Blue
TRS
or-
Panther blue or
Yeah.
something. But that's really just a personal hang up.
Doesn't
Okay.
hurt to ask.
Anything else? Motion to adjourn? Anybody?
Motion to adjourn.
Hey, Ian's got it. Gene, you second? You there? Okay. Gene seconded, Sandy.
Yeah, I missed that, I guess.
Okay. All in favor of adjourning at 8:02 p.m. say aye.
Aye.